Hello, my name is Adam, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Game, the podcast where I invite people on to tell me about their tabletop RPG games, their sessions, their campaigns, their characters, their homebrewed worlds. We're talking D&D, Pathfinder, Fate, Powered by the Apocalypse games, Starfinder, Masks, and many others. These people are not celebrities or big industry insiders, they're just people who love a game. If you're playing it, I want to hear about it, and if you clicked on this podcast, maybe you want to hear about them too. This week I spoke with Christopher, that's TBMGames on Twitter, or Games TBM, about his Homebrew Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign and the act of adapting existing game resources like the Monster Manual for your own specific homebrew purposes. We also talked about the 1985 Michelle Pfeiffer film Ladyhawke for some reason. Okay, alright, so we are here with TBM underscore Christopher. And we are going to be talking about some world building today. Christopher, would you mind telling us in brief a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me. I started out with TTRPGs back in 2009 using prize money off of a Pokemon card tournament, actually.
That's an amazing start. Wow.
It's the most on-brand moment of my life, really. Taking $15 of prize money and buying the 4th edition starter set.
Well, nerddom begets nerddom, I guess.
True. Mm-hmm. And that pretty much became the dominant passion in my life. I've really loved world building even before that, but having a codified system from D&D and later other systems helped me to just keep on building. From there, I took a brief 3-year detour studying video game design and computer science out in the Seattle area before coming back here to Nebraska, where now I write small supplements for my independent publishing company, TBMGames, doing third-party content for 5th edition. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at GamesTBM.
Okay, so you wanted to talk about world building today and specifically throwing together... Well, perhaps you put it better than I did, so...
What I was kind of wanting to talk about was what's called modular fiction. Modular fiction, to draw back on the Pokemon experience, when people talk about Pokemon, there is a very strong argument for, all the games are all the same. You wander around in the countryside at the ripe old age of 10 years old. You catch wild animals. You make them fight for your entertainment. And sometimes you stop some bad guys along the way.
Yeah, but all of the stories are kind of just like a means to an end of starting an underground animal fighting ring.
At least bringing structure to that underground fighting ring. And that's the thing. Modular fiction, the specific elements of that fiction may change, and that will affect your context. But ultimately, it is kind of a plug-and-play notion. Yeah, sure, 1 week it's Charizard, but you can easily switch out Charizard for Blastoise or a much less marketable friend like Garbodor.
I love Garbodor.
He's absolutely adorable. I love Garbage Totoro.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's actually the inspiration for his design.
That does explain a lot, actually. I've actually brought up a picture just to, I'm bringing them up side by side right now, and I'm like, that's the parody I didn't know that I needed, really.
Shot for shot, there were some scenes from the anime that were actually just My Neighbor Totoro, but with Pokemon.
No kidding. Okay, wow. See, taking something else and putting a new skin on it. Full circle.
Exactly, and that's pretty much what I think is at the very core of not just how I tend to do my world building, but it's kind of how D&D as a whole seems to be intended to be played. I mean, the Monster Manual, for instance, it gives you a whole bunch of long, dry paragraphs about what a monster is, what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And then it doesn't really tell you, and that's how you use it. And so you're given this toy box of different shaped blocks, and it's up to you to figure out how you want to stack them.
Absolutely. Take what you want, leave the rest. Certainly one thing that I have noticed in the D&D community is, and I'm sure it's not exactly news to anybody, that there's a sort of an undercurrent of purism in a lot of how a lot of people see it. Like, you have to do it this way, you have to do it by the book, you can't switch things up, and I think people are really selling themselves short when they take that attitude. And I think a lot of this basically is saying you don't have to do that. You can literally do whatever you want with this stuff. You can bend it, shape it any way you want it. I feel like there's like I said, there's that undercurrent there that you might be fighting against for that. I have a player personally who he says that when he was coming up on TTRPGs, he mostly plays Pathfinder. There was a lot of that attitude for him, and it actually kind of scared him away of adapting official sources through his own needs, because he was playing with people who they had done their reading, they read all the books, they knew the monster stat blocks by heart. They considered it cheating to change anything. I'm sure that's a style of play. It's certainly not my style of play, but there are those who can be happy with that. But I feel like that some people might be hesitant to do as you're saying.
Yeah, I think that a lot of portrayals of how D&D should go these days have been that you need to adhere to a stack of 50 books worth of Forgotten Realms lore, or heaven forbid you try and dredge through something older like Greyhawk or Blackmoor, when a lot of those worlds were designed with this ground up approach of well, my players are wandering through a swamp. Can I come up with a swamp monster this week?
Yep. I know when I was starting out, there was a lot of I either have to make everything up or I have to do everything from the book. And I've definitely gotten away from that. I've actually, not going to lie, I've started ripping from my favorite 80s fantasy movies for a little tiny, like discrete pieces of plot. I have one encounter that's basically just the Matthew Broderick film Lady Hawk. Can you give... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask you more about Lady Hawk.
Lady Hawk? Are you familiar?
I am not familiar.
Okay, it's basically a film that's based on an old French folktale. It's a love story where the captain of the guard fell in love with a young woman who was played by Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie, and a local bishop or cardinal, I think he's a bishop, grew jealous and called upon dark powers of Satan or something like that, and cursed the both of them, so that the guy at night turns into a wolf, and the woman during the day turns into a hawk, hence Lady Hawk, and they can never see each other, and the only way to break the curse is for them both to stand before the bishop as man and woman. And the movie is about making that happen, because they've just discovered that there's an eclipse that's going to happen, which will both allow them to be human at the same time. But yeah, no, it's just stuff like that. I'm gonna have to cut that whole thing out.
I'm sorry. Sorry to drag you on that tangent.
I'm just so interesting. I can't help it. I mean, no.
That's the reason I signed up for this.
Oh, good. I'll take it. That's great. All right. So to completely 180. Do you have some examples of things that you have done? Examples of this modular fiction, ways that you have worked it into campaigns and stories, etc.
Well, there are a couple ways that you can do this. The most obvious one is to look through, say, whatever bestiary you're looking at, and just figure out this monster does this, this, and this. Well, let's go with, I believe it's the green hags that typically are the ones that their whole shtick is to try and get people to do horrible things, thinking that they're doing the right thing.
I mean, that sounds... I honestly don't know offhand, but that does sound about right.
And see, that's another problem with it is you do this for too long, and suddenly you forget what parts are established.
You forget the specifics, and then the canon changes, and then you've got your own canon.
Yeah, and you basically start making your own context for these things to the point where you've lost track of it. But to try and circle back to this specific example, so we'll assume that I'm right about how green hags work.
We'll say that, yeah.
We'll assume that I'm right is typically the first step in any of my DMing. Say the green hag thrives on this, tricking people into doing horrible things, thinking that it's in their best interest or that it's the right thing to do. That's an easy one because you can throw a green hag into just about any context where there's any sort of moral decision, and she can egg a player on and go, "Oh yeah, sure. If you just kill this monster, then the village over there will be safe." Little do you know, the monster that she's describing is actually like a patron protector of said village.
Mm-hmm. The best thing I think about a green hag whose only priority is causing that level of misery, and moreover getting people to
Mhm.
do that misery unto themselves, is that you can drop them literally any place, and they don't have to have a stake in what's going on. They just want to cause mayhem.
Exactly, and that is their only stake. You can have them hanging around at the side of the road just out of the
They've
blue.
got the hook built in.
Right, so they're an easy one to work with. The reason this comes up is because there is a green hag who is pulling the strings in one of my campaigns right now.
Ooh. Is that a spoiler? Should I mark should I spoiler warning ahead for 5 people?
Nah, they're not going to notice. And
Okay.
quite frankly, they're paranoid enough already that I could say anything right here and they will scribble down some notes and pin them to their crazy wall.
Yeah. Just don't tell them about the vampire Tarrasque that you told me about earlier off mic.
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking about adding mummy to that mix.
Vampire Mummy Tarrasque. Dire Tarrasque.
Well, yeah, once you deal with the vampire Tarrasque, you got to deal with its mummy mother.
I'm calling my mummy. I'm sorry, I'm 5. Ignore me.
So yeah, context drag and drop is the simplest way to do this. You find a monster you like, you adapt and figure out, okay, how can I shove this into the adventure that I'm GMing right now?
Mm-hmm.
But on the more extreme end of it, there's refluffing, which is you take a monster's stat blocks because there's this convenient book of monsters that are allegedly balanced for combat.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. The secret is you don't have to use any of the descriptors that are offered to you. Yeah, sure. It says green dragon, big, scaly reptile with bat wings. But what if it's not? What if it's like one of Thea Jansen's strand beasts? It's a giant wooden creature that crab walks all over the area, and it just happens to emit poison gas if it's threatened in a fight.
Yeah, there's nothing about 16d6 poison damage that necessarily has to be a green dragon. You know, those two parts of the stat block are they are unrelated, and they don't have to be related. I actually, yeah, I do that all the time. Most recently, I was running Lost Mine of Phandelver, and
Mhm.
there's this section where it's very straightforward. You're asked to go hunt some orcs, and you go hunt some orcs, and you kill the orcs, and then you get a reward. And I didn't like that, both because I love orcs, and I'm trying to be more conscious about some of the social implications of what I'm doing here in game, and also because it felt too straightforward. So what instead I had it be that they got this thing to go deal with the orcs, And they went out. They said there was an orc war band was operating out on the fringes of society, and they were to be brought down. So they went out there, and what they discovered was it wasn't an orc war band. It was an orc band. It was a traveling group of orc minstrels who had called themselves the War Band. And so they're like, okay, these guys are actually pretty great. I did like a Tommy Chong kind of voice there, man. And, we're just orcs. We're having a good time over here, man. And so the idea was like, okay, these guys are actually pretty cool. All right, we'll just leave them to their own devices and we'll tell them what's going on back at the town. And then they go to leave. And then a handful of mercenaries that they had previously met in the town start creeping up. They've gotten the same notice that there's a bounty out for these orcs, and they don't care that these guys are actually cool and it was a false alarm. They are going to kill these cool, nice orcs and take them back. And all I had to do there was change the story a little bit. I used the orc stat blocks that were provided in the book to be these mercenaries. So these are human mercenaries with orc stat blocks. It gives you the same experience with a more interesting hook.
Yeah, and your players aren't going to look over the screen or at your notes and go, "Hey, it says orc here. Are we fighting orcs?"
I mean, God willing, I do all my stuff over Roll20, so everybody's at least 30 miles away from me.
Oh, that's the best way to keep your players away.
Yeah, the cameras I have mounted in your house. What? Don't worry about that. The cameras I have mounted in your house seem to indicate that that's an orc stat block. That's my story. I'm taking over. I'm completely taking over I'm being interviewed now. Now you're interviewing me.
That's part of my fake curse is that as people talk with me for too long, I slowly just subvert their roles into my own.
Look at me. I am the interviewer now.
That's why everybody tells me to change my Twitter handle. Every time they say, change your Twitter handle, Nat1Advice no longer applies to you, I gain their powers.
I have probably said that many times. So what can I say? I really enjoy your Twitter. It's a good time. See, this is a thing that I've basically been doing for years now, and I didn't even realize. I thought it feels like cheating at first.
Yeah, when you're not used to it, it does feel like this. It feels like this taboo thing that you're doing to take this painstakingly written description of a monster and go, I'm not using that.
It reminds me a little bit of that Twitter artists discourse. It's been going on for a while now. That's basically like whether or not you should be allowed to use reference, whether using references for your drawings is cheating. It reminds me a little bit of that. And no, first of all, nobody's going to know. Second of all, official sources, they're there for you to use as you will. I will say, I've also noticed that people do this with NPCs that they like. Recently, I posted a thing on Twitter that was basically like, hey, name me some famous goblins. And people were talking about, one of the ones was Droop from the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It's a very popular character. And apparently, people use him in more than just the Lost Mine of Phandelver. People actually port NPCs wholesale. Personality-wise, they might change a name, but they take the concept and they insert them into their own campaigns. You're currently running a campaign?
I am currently running 3 campaigns.
Oh, jeez.
So I'll talk about the one that does the most heavy refluffing, I think, just so that we're staying on topic a bit.
Yeah. That's basically what I was asking. Is like, how does that all come together? And how much of it is refluffed, modularly relocated fiction, and versus your own stuff versus anything official. I don't know how much of your campaign is homebrew, and how is it entirely intended as a homebrew, or is it based off of a module, or what's up?
So it is entirely homebrew. Basically, what we did was I like to start a long-term campaign like this one with a game called Microscope, where basically each player takes turns laying out just about a paragraph tidbit about the world, and you lay those out as in physical terms, you would use index cards. We used Padlet. And so you can insert these paragraphs of events just wherever they fit on a timeline.
Oh, that's a really great idea.
And so by the end of it, not only do you have a decently fleshed out setting for a campaign, but it's one that your players have participated in shaping the history of. So they've got a passing familiarity with what's going on, but with enough room that you can still add things as GM with no
They're
problem.
part owners. I mean, if I was a player, it would give me a feeling of ownership over the world that you just don't get in. You don't show up and bring your dice.
Exactly. Players kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to world building. So I try to give them any opportunity that they want to come up with new factions or characters in the world and integrate them as quickly as I can. And so sometimes I feel like that I feel like Wallace and Gromit, that scene where Gromit's laying the track as the train is zooming forwards.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it gives the players so much more investment to be able to say, yeah, I know Dashing Pete over here, he's with the Thieves Guild. Oh, no, I didn't write anything about a Thieves Guild. But anyways, pivoting a little bit back there, so the high-level pitch of this world has been that wood is a very scarce resource. There was this huge war fought over these 7 druidic groves, which had the first trees to ever grow in the world. Over the course of this last great war, all sorts of untold horrors were unleashed on the world, including a blight that just causes wood to spontaneously rot within minutes.
Oh, wow.
And so this world is filled with people who are definitely afraid, is the best way to put it. This last Great War was somewhere around 80 years ago, but it's definitely still a presence. And so I think the only thing that is necessarily vanilla at this point is the classic fantasy races do exist in some capacity, but I generously refluff just about every encounter. I make very heavy use of the of Kobold Press's Tome of Beasts.
Oh, I have Tome of Beasts 2 sitting right next to me right now.
Absolutely my favorite supplement from a third party that I haven't written.
You go through it and you're just like boggled with the possibilities. You're just like, I'm not sure what circumstances under which I would use that, but I would find a way.
Exactly. And my players are fairly well versed in the vanilla stuff, so any resource that they're not intimately familiar with is a huge help.
Well, adding a certain point about refluffing, that's actually once you establish that the stuff that they are encountering are the stuff that their characters are encountering are not stuff that they as people are familiar with from the books, it creates an added layer of excitement. Because I think if you get a lot of experienced players, it could easily become boring if you're just using everything from a book.
Right.
They know what they're looking at. If you establish that this world is full of mystery and that there's no way that that they as players and therefore their characters can know exactly what it is that they're up against in any particular encounter, you've established a level of excitement for these people again.
Yeah, you've made it new again, which is a very difficult thing to achieve, especially now that we're 9 years into 5th edition.
Yep. Oh God, has it been?
It's something close to that, because the playtests were when I was in high school, so that would have been 2012.
Wow. Huh. I'm quite elderly.
Yeah, we're just sitting here rapidly aging right now. But yeah, with almost a decade of establishment in 5th edition now, that's kind of inevitable that people are going to be familiar with like the bog standard trolls and
It literally bog in some cases.
exactly.
Probably more so than any other previous editions, especially with the addition of Dungeon Masters Guild. There's a lot of supplements that are still coming out. They still come out rapid fire, third party, first party, what have you, and that helps, I'm sure. But you've got some people they just live and breathe it. So
You really need to just have I don't want to say a system because that leaves it feeling pretty sterile, but
a means by which to deal with. Yeah,
you have to have a plan of attack. Let's go with that. That sounds more fantasy-esque.
it's dynamic.
Yeah,
Yes.
you need that plan of attack in order to figure out how am I going to make this feel mysterious and new when there's potential for a player to have had, if not the decade-ish of experience with this edition, almost 50 years of D&D as a whole.
You get to a point where bringing back old stuff from older editions almost feels like new stuff again. You got 5+ different versions of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we bring back the Nilbogs.
Yeah, yeah. My kobolds have dog faces. My kobolds don't. I like little dragon men, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm a bigger fan of Little Dragon Men myself, but there's something to be said about the charm of the little dog people. So yeah, I like I was saying, I make really heavy use of the Tome of Beasts because that's a piece that's unfamiliar to this particular group of players. Tome of Beasts has so much very specific lore to like the Midgard setting that some of it is useful because I'm using kind of this Mediterranean aesthetic for this world. Sometimes not so much, but what I've been doing is there are these two competing corporate factions that are fighting over the scraps of these forests that are still around. And so one of these two factions is very much the mage punk Eberron looking
Oh yeah, yep.
and so, yeah, they're out there inventing all sorts of unique and novel forms of alchemy and artifice that the players get thrown for a loop on a regular basis, trying to figure out, well, what on earth are they doing with that? Which culminates in, well, what, like I mentioned earlier, the Strand Beasts. They've been building these gigantic Strand Beasts out of what few resources they can dish together, and those are very established threats in the world to have to deal with.
Just sitting here like thinking about the possibilities of this world that you've laid out, and it's just like like I'm like, oh man, no, mustn't steal. No.
Oh, by all means, steal away.
Modular fiction.
That's the whole point. This module can fit into your fiction.
But you just described that central tension of the world, and I was just like, oh my god, like I was worried that I was coming off like I wasn't particularly listening or interested, but I'm just sitting here like staring at the wall going like, shit. Can you like what is it to be a druid in this world, you know?
And that's where I'm going with this. So the second faction, real quick, just to give you the broad strokes.
Mhm.
So we've got the mage punk, very refined corporate structure.
Yep.
We've got a more traditional divine cast. It is still an established corporate structure in this world that's headed by a blue dragon. And
Wow.
this organization uses more traditional divine magic. And so they're a little bit on the stodgier side. They're slow to react. And they're off on this very traditional high fantasy quest to free the dragon that leads them. And
Oh.
so you've got this conflict here between tradition and innovation. which winds up being a recurring theme in a lot of my games. Luckily, my different groups of players don't interact much, so they haven't caught on. But
I like how that happens, though. It's like it's almost like your own game is telling you what's on your mind.
and then finally, the third faction in all of this, the Druids, as you mentioned, they're kind of in a defensive stance here. During the Great War, they saw these untold horrors from the Blight, which was this magical disease that instantly rots plant life.
Oh, plant life, not just trees, huh?
Yeah, and so
Ooh.
they took to a very isolationist approach, and so these 7 distinct groves went their separate ways, and a whole lot of culture has been lost to them because they're no longer in communication with each other. And these druids had been, before this, a fairly welcoming society. There's a grove off to one end of the continent that is run by angels who use druidic magic, while on the other end of the continent, there are these orc mages who have been using this magically infused mercury and slowly tainting their own grove in an attempt to fortify it better.
I love that. That's a very orc way of dealing with the situation. Like, your traditional orcs
Mhm.
who are all about like brute strength and power. They're literally like beating up their own trees to make them hardier. That is such a
Yeah.
like, if you put orc and druid together, that's brilliant. I love that.
And so it's kind of the confluence of these different cultures that the players are experiencing. Their goal, they're trying to actually get these separate groves back in touch with each other in order to rally to defend against these 2 major corporate interests.
Sure. Wow, there's a lot of dynamics at play there. With the first two, you have that sort of tradition versus innovation, and
Mhm.
then you've got the druids who have just like to be a druid in this world. They're like radically sort of reworking their identity. Like things have changed so much. You said they used to be welcoming, but now for the sheer sake of their own survival and the survival of that which they hold dearest, they have to be not that. They it's a major culture change, yeah?
Yeah, and on top of that, the druids are, in some sense, they're making a huge sacrifice by doing this because they recognize that left unchecked, these powers would gladly cut down literally every single blade of grass in one of their groves if it functioned in some way for a profit.
Oh my god, that is the realest shit right there. Good thing that's nothing like the real world.
That's true. It would be a real shame if our corporate interests were not ones which had our best interests in mind.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
terrible?
Anyways,
Yeah. Dice and paper.
oh, dice and paper. Oh, paper.
Oh no! Oh no! You monster.
So this world, it's facing a very large 3-way conflict that hopefully my players are finding ways to make it so that it's no longer profitable to be evil. As I was saying, this is a very aesthetically different world than most.
Traditional fantasy.
Yeah. And so I find myself refluffing a lot of different sources to try and make things work. For instance, one that I've taken heavy use out of lately was from Tome of Beasts 2, I believe. It's called The Dark Voice, which that alone is a pretty sinister name. And I have refluffed that to be this. Typically, it's this dark mage. It's kind of malice given physical form in a sense. And so one of its abilities is just that it creates like this field of magical darkness around them. A very standard fare type function there. But instead of that, it is one of this corporation's artificer type characters. he's harnessed this power from the very disease that's causing this horrible plant rot.
Thought that's where you were going with that.
Yeah, and so he can basically use it as like a short burst to create this field of rot where he's taking advantage of this decay in order to get a whole bunch of sneak attacks in, pretty much as per the rogue class feature, but in a much more sinister and setting contextualized way.
Well, that's something as simple as a dark force that is malice given form. I mean, there's so many different ways you can take that and tailor it to whatever the darkest form of malice is for your world.
Right. And in this case, unfortunately, in this setting, the greatest form of malice is, of course, humanity. So, yeah, he's a guy.
What humanity will do when pressed, basically. You know, you've dropped this major change into what otherwise might have been a traditional fantasy world and sort of seeing the psychology of what people are doing.
Right. People are scared, and a lot of this setting has been exploring, well, how do they react to this fear, especially one that has been ongoing for almost a century now. So, yeah, sure, in your life, this cataclysm didn't happen, but you can look around and you can still see scars on the land where this battle occurred or that atrocity was committed. It's very real, but it's also just a little bit distant.
And it's like your three factions represent different facets of that struggle. There's trying to adapt and create a different way of living, which is your mage guys. There's calling upon a higher power for mercy, which is your divines, and then there's fighting back. There's fighting back against this dark force that's creeping over the world, which it sounds like is what your druids are. Can I ask if your players who are currently going through this? Can I ask? So I keep getting into your world instead of the initial topic of the discussion, but where do they fall on this continuum?
Well, I think that they're really the catalyst that is forcing the druids to decide to respond in this way. They were the ones who first saw a one of these 7 druidic groves only had 1 druid left in it,
Oh, jeez.
and he had no idea that any of the other groves were doing any better. And so they brought him to one of these other groves that was actually relatively thriving. And from this, they learned, yeah, the different groves are in very disparate states, and nobody really knows what's going on in each of them.
But the fate of the world kind of hangs in the balance with what's going on with these groves.
Right. And as they've gradually discovered, there are schemes unfolding on either side of these corporate interests to try and exploit the fact that these groves are probably in their decline. And in fact,
Mhm.
the grove that had the 1 member in it, that one has fallen as of very early on in this campaign. Their ultimate goal, as I understand it, and I have made it very clear to my players that I'm more interested in seeing what solutions they want to come up with than proposing any of my own.
Yep.
Their goal is, like I said, to make it less profitable to be evil. They have gone to each of these groves and they've established communication with the druids therein. And they are trying to build this kind of a network of portals between the groves because they span the entire continent to make a more convenient economic channel for just everyday people. The idea being that with this resource, kind of democratizing their world, with that resource available to everybody, these 2 major corporate interests are not going to be able to keep this stranglehold on everyday life.
You're doing a fantasy socialism.
Oh, it's definitely a fantasy socialism.
That's excellent. How much would you say you mentioned before the Wallace and Gromit train tracks? To what extent have your players themselves, what they want to do, the things that they've made up, and the backstories that they've given their characters, how much has that played into it? We were talking about like modular stuff. Adapting what your players give you, I think, is also a part of that.
Oh, definitely. Well, like I said, I'm firmly of the opinion that any opportunity that players have to build in a world, they should be given. So,
Mm-hmm.
starting with that game of Microscope, honestly, before we even started that, the only thing that I had in mind was that I wanted this world to kind of look like Renaissance Italy, like the Da Vinci punk type.
Da Vinci Punk.
Yeah.
Damn it, man. I'm sorry. This is the good shit. All right.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
was the only thing on my agenda was
Mhm.
that Da Vinci punk aesthetic. And as my players start talking about what sort of themes they wanted to explore in this, it kind of became apparent that there was this theme of like conservation and innovation going on, trying to find the intersection between the two.
Mm.
And that has entirely formed the world around that. Sometimes it gets really easy on my end to almost fall into these cartoonish tropes of, yeah, sure, the first corporation that I mentioned, they're building all sorts of weird technological innovations. How far do I go before it is just they're dumping toxic chemicals at the orphanage?
They're Captain Planet villains. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely ample opportunities to make it more complex than that because, as mentioned, they are trying to
Hmm.
adapt to a changing world, and that cannot really be seen as an inherently bad thing. But it's
Yeah.
where are the limits? You know?
One thing that has definitely helped that is since these players like to explore this continent, they're meeting all sorts of people who are positively affected by all of this.
Hmm.
And that is one of the greatest challenges that they have to face is not only the battle with the literal villain, but just this arena of public opinion that
Hmm.
they are they're unknown contenders in, whereas the dominant economic powers, they've been around since that Great War, and people look at them and go, "Well, they've been keeping us safe this whole time."
Hmm. It's not as simple as this faction is bad, this faction is good, which is you're building complex stories with that. And I just it feels a bit heavy because of course it does. Look around.
Yeah.
But it also feels like I can like it feels very satisfying and you're just telling me about it. Like I would love to play in a world that has this kind of nuance to it. Most of my games are pretty wacky. There is something that I like to do. You wouldn't happen to have a D100 on you, would you? Or percentile dice?
Just a second. I do, in fact, have some dice right here.
Would you like to roll for some questions about your world?
Gladly.
All right, give me that D100 roll.
All right. Let's see if this if the mic picks this up nicely.
Oh, that's what we're here for.
42.
You're kidding me!
I kid you not.
Aries got 42 last time. That's amazing. I remember because Life, the Universe, and Everything.
Right.
But yeah, this one comes from Star Shinobi on Twitter. What aspect of your world did you create and just want to discuss that rarely gets asked about by your players? Like what piece of background lore is there if they go looking for it, but you don't really expect them to go looking for it, but you think it's cool?
Oh gosh.
It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one.
That's especially a tough one because, like I was saying, my players have had so much of a role in creating this world. I think that one of the, and this is something that I suspect the players are going to explore in the future, is
Christopher's players. Pause the thing. Skip ahead a few seconds.
yes, begone my players. One thing that they haven't explored in much detail is the fate of the dragons from that Great War, because, like I mentioned, The Dragos Consortium, that is one organization, mostly humanoids, that their goal is to free the blue dragon that is actually responsible for the blight that's been killing off plant life across the world. But that's just one dragon. They've learned that during that Great War, black dragons were forced to extinction. Red dragons wound up taking a more harmonious approach, and their descendants are intermingled amongst the general populace, but not well publicized.
Like draconic human form?
They are in a more disguised humanoid form.
Gotcha. So they've gone underground in a sense.
Exactly. Green dragons are the ones that my players have had the most dealings with. They became druids after that war.
That's interesting, given that they tend to be like the opposite of that. Like this, they've got the poison aspect.
And that's why they were valued as druids too. Just recognizing this disaster and what its effects were going to be.
That's interesting.
They've met green dragons because, like I said, they were traveling between the groves.
Do the green dragons spend their time in humanoid form, or are they just scales to the wind?
Scales to the wind and abysmally lazy. The green dragon they met first, Cedrimac, he is about the size of a house. And what he does is he just basks in this hot spring all day.
That's alive.
And if asked why he became a druid, he would probably just answer that he likes frogs.
Oh my god, I love him. Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's great. I can't wait for Aries to hear this one. They're going to love it. Wow. Okay. Would you like to roll for another one? I like to do a couple of these questions.
By all means. Let's see what we got. 50.
Number 50. This one comes from... Oh, that's an interesting one. This one comes from crazy_Newt on Twitter. Crazy Newt. It is... How are children taught in your world? What is the state of education?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. So it really depends on where on the continent you're looking, but for the most part, education is probably mostly handled in the private sector by the Trevisan Corporation, the ones that are really heavy on the alchemy and stuff.
The majors, yeah.
Obviously, from that private education, you're going to have a more favorable opinion of what the Trevisan Corporation is and does.
Yeah, just see with the way education about national history goes. It's always kind of, favors that country as the good guy.
Well, you don't want to admit that you're the bad guys.
No. You want them proud. You want them working and not unionizing.
Exactly. Stop that nonsense talk. And so, aside from that very elite educated cast, for the most part, it would just be more vocational training in the sense of, my father was a blacksmith, so he taught me how to work at the forge as well.
So between the common folk and the mage syndicate, there's a little bit of a drop off in perhaps quality of life and technology.
Yeah, for the most part, the common laborer benefits from a lot of public works projects that the Trevisan Corporation does. But on the other hand, Trevisan makes very few efforts to, uplift people from that laboring caste into their ranks.
Their ultimate goal is to adapt themselves out of the bad situation the world finds itself in, and perhaps they have given themselves heirs on that front.
Yeah, they've got theirs. Why should they care about these little people?
Our work is important. It'll benefit everybody eventually. Don't worry. It will trickle down to you.
It will trickle down, and that may just be a chemical spill.
Okay. All right, we're moving on more. I'll tell you what. How's about one more roll? One more, just one more roll for the road.
Just one more for the road. Let's see what we got. 82.
82. Oh, that's basically the same as the last question. It's what part of your world? Not the last question, the first question.
Oh.
What? This comes from Sean the Nerd with 2 D's on the end of nerd.
Ah.
What part of your world are you most excited for players to find? So that's kind of like what do your players not know about that you're excited about?
I think I can at least take that in a little bit of a different direction.
Okay.
So, just geographically speaking, a place that my players have not yet explored is the actual prison that this blue dragon has been kept in for all this time. Now, if my players are listening, I mean it. Don't listen.
Okay, we'll come and get you.
Basically, the prison that the dragon is being kept in, along with the entirety of all of Blue Dragon kind, is this hidden space up in the very northernmost mountains that, because of all the druidic magic that had been used to seal him away, it looks like this ghastly mirror image of the druidic groves that my players have been exploring.
Ooh.
It quite literally has dragon trees, if you've ever seen those.
I've not. But I do have the internet because we are in the internet age and I never have to be uncertain about anything.
With the power of Google image search.
But that's a nice little indicator. It's a nice little
Yeah, kind of the since this is a podcast to give listeners more of a sense of what it is. If you've played Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, there is an area that's instead of the regular trees, there are these large kind of mushroom-shaped trees.
Yep.
Like the classic vertical trunk, but then very spiky branches that are kept in a very dense cluster at almost a right angle to the trunk.
Yeah, it looks like a mushroom made out of lawn.
Exactly. And I picked these trees not just because they're called dragon trees, but because they're also not technically a species of tree.
No kidding.
They're more closely related to grass, and I thought that was like the most thematically fitting aspect to them. That this prison of dragons is not itself a druidic grove, and it looks like there are trees growing here, but they're just fundamentally not.
Wow. Yeah.
It very much mirrors a lot of the locations that my players have already explored.
See, I love taking a theme of something that you think is really cool in the real world, like some relatively unknown. It's a tree, but actually it's a grass, and finding thematic footing in your own world for it. I think that's quite brilliant. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
So I think the ultimate conclusion is that there is a large wealth of resources that you should feel free to hammer and mar at until you've got something that fits the story that you want to tell. You shouldn't be beholden to any existing written lore.
Yep, you've got the official sources, which can be changed at will. I'm terrible with the mechanics, so I just nick the mechanics and do whatever I please with them. Yeah, you've got old stories that you may like. We lift from those, and we've got older editions, perhaps lore and even stat blocks and mechanics that have been considered to be outmoded. They're never really outmoded if you keep using them.
Except Thaco. Thaco is outmoded, and no one can say differently.
Fuck Thaco, man.
I will fight you.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So, do you want to give a shout out for, let's see, your social media and any projects you might have coming up? Any plugs you want to do?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned before, I'm publishing third-party content for 5th edition under @Games TBM. But if you're looking for something a little bit lighter, I am the Twitter quote-unquote personality @Nat1Advice. where I suggest at various intervals that you should eat your rule books to gain their powers.
Oh, was that a joke?
Uh,
I think I might need to talk to the doctor. Anyway, what are some of your recent projects that you've put out?
Recently, I released The Tamer, which it's full class levels 1 through 20 that lets you bring monster allies into battle with you. And so that has options for the Trapper, which is a tamer who specializes in natural beasts. A lot of what I wanted the Beastmaster Ranger to be in this edition.
What it sounds like it should be, what it feels like it should be.
Yeah. It's the identity that the Beastmaster is touching on before being saddled with all the trappings of the Ranger in addition to that.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring up the Ranger thing, but it was literally the first thing I thought of when you said that. But I didn't want to rehash the old, oh yeah, the 5e Ranger. The audience laughs and we move on.
So yes, there's the Trapper who deals in natural beasts and obviously setting traps. There is the Dragon Master who uses their bartering skills to rope dragons into a pyramid scheme effectively. And finally, the Summoner, who uses a deck of magically infused cards to summon elementals, fiends, and fae to fight on their behalf.
Hey, I've seen that anime.
Yeah.
And it works so well with what we know of the D&D community, right? Because how many times do you see these posts on Twitter from DMs saying, oh, I presented these enemies to my players and they just adopted them, and now they have this monster that goes along with them. They've adopted 5 monsters now. They've got a wolf, and they've got this, and they've got that. They found a baby displacer beast. You know, it's almost like it's a natural instinct that people want to do this, and it's like you're like, okay, well, like, let's make it official. Let's give the people what they want. You know,
exactly. It's a very social game, and so it's kind of a surprise that people are thrown for a loop in that sense of wait, players want to be social?
Yeah. They don't want to maybe necessarily kill the cool thing. Maybe they want to keep the cool thing around and be friends with the cool thing.
So yeah, that's a project that is currently available for anybody to look around at. That's available on Drive-Thru RPG, or playtest drafts of it are available for free over on TBMGames.com. And then an upcoming project that is in playtesting phase right now. So if you want to weigh in on this, then by all means, go to the aforementioned website, tbmgames.com. The Witch class, which is going to be released this coming October.
I saw that when you posted in Discord about it. It was I am deeply intrigued.
Unlike the Wizard or the Warlock, instead of research or
sugar daddies.
Making, sugar daddies. The Witch takes a more traditional approach to magic. They mostly try and cast spells based on circumstance. So they have a sense of now is the right time to use this spell, and it's a more guiding approach, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
It makes me think of the Sir Terry Pratchett's Discworld Witches, where it's 90% psychology and getting yourself into the right spot, and only 10% magic. But that magic has all the more effect for that previous 90%.
Exactly. Well, I should also give you a link to Microscope, since we were talking about that at the beginning.
All right. You can also check out Microscope at www.lamemage.com/ you guessed it, Microscope. I love it. All right. Okay. Thank you for coming out and talking to me. I appreciate it very much.
Hopefully Morning Brain Christopher was not as incoherent as I felt he was there.
Hopefully Morning Brain Adam was more able to understand with his thinky parts than I usually am. Emailed questions, comments, or interview requests can go to sohowwasgame@gmail.com. The intro music is Through the Woods We Ran by Vinsvept. Thanks for listening. I'm sorry, that was from like an hour ago, and I've forgotten the finer details because brain no thinky thinky mix squish.
Well, with the magic of editing, that link can go right back over to there.
Yeah, future Adam here, popping in for a second.
I come bearing a warning from the future. You forgot to link microscope. Also, in 12 seconds, duck.